Now, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivers his maiden speech at 2 o'clock this afternoon. He has the difficult task of explaining how government plans to service its debt and its people. It follows another difficult year for South Africans who are struggling from the after effects of lockdown. My colleague Ropiwa Matsena is at Parliament. Ropiwa, good morning. The minister most certainly has a difficult task ahead of him today.
Absolutely, a tough balancing act that the minister has to do in this afternoon's budget speech. But then again, that's been the status quo in South Africa for a number of years now. Our fiscus is getting a lot smaller in terms of budgetary constraints and also just the priorities that our government is forced to focus on as opposed to others. So we've actually got someone who was intricately involved at some stage, still is, Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi, who is the chairperson of the Standing Committee of Appropriations in South Africa. Thank you very much for your time this morning. As I was saying in my intro, it's a tough balancing act that the minister has to contend with. The money that we have is not a lot as a country, and yet there are still budgets that need to be created and distributed.
That's good morning to you and good morning to our viewers. That's unfortunately the reality that we find ourselves in, and that has been exacerbated by COVID pandemic. And what that has done, you know that the economy has sort of come to a standstill for some time, and as a result of that, people have been out of jobs, businesses closing, and as a result, lower tax collections in general. So with all these needs, people are out of jobs, but you also want to try and help those people. The revenue is decreasing, or is not reaching the levels which you want it to be. So definitely it is a very, very delicate balancing act. Just to add that, you know that I think it's out there that the commodities have performed, and which was quite a windfall, which has helped all types of figures which are being thrown around. But the fact of the matter that was one positive thing which came up. So which I think it sort of did help the Minister of Finance and the team to do some a better balancing act.
But ultimately, that commodity super cycle that you're referring to does come to an end.
Yes.
And he still is going to need to find money to do something.
Yeah.
And one of the things that were raised in the State of the Nation address, which is where he gets his direction from, is that the special relief grant of the 350 will be extended till next year, March. Where does the minister find money for this? I mean, there are economists who anticipate that he might be forced to increase things like VAT, for example.
Yes, I think it's, again, another reality, right? Because we are having all these people, you must provide the safety net as the government. If you remember, the president in SONA said nobody should be left behind, right? So this COVID-19 has done a lot of bad things. So we can't afford to leave the most vulnerable out. So that's why the government decided that let's extend the SRD grant. So where does the money come from? Again, it's budgeting. You take somewhere, as we're saying, as we're talking now, at least we're talking about the commodities performing, and again, higher than expected revenue from SARS. So that's going to help him. But what's important is, what do we do? Because as we are saying, what did we do to try and get out of that now that we are back into economic activity? So the ANC has identified infrastructure spend as an area that we should really be looking at, and a number of infrastructure projects have been identified. But you know, there's this the infrastructure fund where we committed 10 billion rand per annum, right, as a government, as a way of trying to crowd in private sector investment. Right now, we said in the next 10 years we wanted to have in that fund 10 billion rand every year. That takes us to 100 billion rand. But as we're saying, and again, if you listen to the president, there's projects worth about 96 billion rand, which will be will be implemented. So that's very important, because what we are saying, at the end of the day, our salvation lies in the economy, which is growing and growing at a faster rate. So that's what we should be doing. So we should identify those things. And again, if you listen to the president's speech, those things have been identified. For instance, if you talk about infrastructure, I spoke about Sfiso Dam, which should come on board. Social infrastructure, again. Remember, when we do that, it's the providing of that service. That's number one. But two, we are creating some liquidity in the market. You are putting money into the market. So the firms that are providing those things again are able to perform and again employ more people. If we employ more people, those people are also going to be able to pay more tax. Also taking some people out of these social grants and so on. So as I'm saying, at the end of the day, what do we do to try and get out of the economic stagnation that we find ourselves in?
Absolutely. And while we ask that question, we also have to think about the priorities that the minister should focus on and some others that he shouldn't be focusing on.
Right.
How much do you think he will weigh in on the state of state-owned entities? The two biggest ones at the moment that I think are the biggest headaches are Denel and ESCOM. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we should always say, what is the role that is being played by that SOE as we decide whether we do recapitalize, we do a bailout. Let's take ESCOM for an example. I don't think that government has got an option of not supporting ESCOM, because if ESCOM were to stop functioning today, it means the whole economy is going to come down. All the things that we are talking about will never be realized. So it's very important when you look at those things that to say what role is ESCOM playing. But I also say let's also be a little bit historical. Before 1994, less than 50% of the households were electrified. Now, over 80% and close to 90% of households have been electrified. I tell you, there's no private sector which would have gone to the rural areas, to the far-flung areas and electrified those things. And we know how critical it is to have electricity, how critical it is to have a running water, which is also dependent on whether electricity is there or not. So I'm saying that sometimes people jump to saying that, no, go to private sector. There are things that private sector can't do. That's why the president talks about consensus. Let's have this consensus so that we can say, under these conditions, one, how do we put shoulder to the wheel as government, as private sector, as the trade union, as the civil society. For instance, the responsibility of civil society, just to add, to make sure that once we have got infrastructure, it's being protected.
Yes. No, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi there, giving us some important insights on what he anticipates will be focused on in today's budget speech, obviously indicating that the finance minister will be taking his direction from the State of the Nation address, which focused on social issues in terms of those who don't have access to basic needs. And here I'm specifically talking about the 350 Rand relief grant, but also highlighting that there needs to be collaboration between government and business. It's not just business who can sort out all South Africa's problems. There needs to be a consensus, as he says, and a sense of collaboration, because there's some things that business can't do, but government certainly does pave the way. And of course, the funding for that paving comes from Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana later on this afternoon.